The scent of antiseptic was an invisible hand, clamped tightly around my throat. I lay on the cold operating table, the surgical lights above glaringly bright, bleaching everything in my vision into a desolate, hopeless white. The crisp, indifferent clink of metal instruments was a hammer striking my taut nerves with every impact. "Ethan," my voice was hoarse and dry, laced with a plea so pathetic it shamed even me. "For the sake of our 3 years of marriage, I'm begging you. Let this baby live." My 6-month-old fetus, as if sensing my terror, shifted slightly. That faint movement was a needle that instantly pierced the fragile composure I was clinging to. Tears burst from my eyes, uncontrollable. The man standing by the table was my husband, Ethan Vance. He wore an expensive, custom-tailored suit. His posture impeccable, his handsome face, with the strong jawline I had adored for 5 years, was now utterly devoid of warmth. All I saw was a cold, impatient storm brewing in his eyes. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed beyond me, out the window at the glittering New York City skyline, his commercial empire, his brilliant future. My child and I were nothing but a smudge on his grand blueprint, easily erased. "Emily, stop making a scene," he finally said, his voice carrying a trace of weariness. "Victoria's son can't wait. You're still young. We can have another child later." Later? A desolate laugh escaped me as tears soaked my temples. "Ethan, there is no later. It took everything I had to conceive this child. The doctors had said my constitution made it difficult. For him, I had drunk bitter herbal concoctions for a whole year, endured countless acupuncture needles. I gave up all the cold and spicy foods I loved, my life becoming an ascetic ritual of bodily preparation. The day the pregnancy test showed 2 lines, I had wept in his arms all night, believing this was the fruit of our love, the hope that could save our teetering home. I naively thought a child would bring him back, would end his absurd affair with that woman, Victoria Bell. How wrong I was. Victoria, his college sweetheart, his one that got away, had returned from abroad with a 5-year-old son diagnosed with acute leukemia. The boy needed a bone marrow transplant, or, even better, stem cells from a newborn's umbilical cord. And so, my 6-month-old baby became the life-saving medicine for her son. "Ethan!" I struggled to sit up, but 2 large male orderlies pinned my shoulders down. Their grip was like iron clamps, immobilizing me. All I could do was crane my neck, staring at his cold profile. "Do you remember when we first got married? The company's cash flow broke, and you were up all night with insomnia. It was me who secretly sold the only thing my mother left me, that vintage Cartier diamond necklace, to plug the hole for you. You held me then and swore you would never let me down for the rest of your life. Have you forgotten all of that?" Ethan's body tensed for a moment, a flicker of emotion in his eyes. I knew he wasn't completely heartless. His heart was just encased in layers of ambition and selfishness, hardened like steel. Just as I thought my pleas might be working, his phone buzzed. The name Victoria flashed on the screen. He answered almost immediately, the cold mask on his face melting into a tenderness I had never seen. "Tori? Don't cry. What's wrong?" From the other end, Victoria's weak, urgent sobs were audible. "Ethan, Aiden, he has a high fever again. The doctor said, if we don't find a suitable stem cell match soon, he might—" "Oh, Ethan, I'm so scared. Don't be afraid. I'm here." Ethan's voice was a caress of doting and heartache I'd never heard directed at me. "I've already made the arrangements. Aiden will be saved very soon. You just be good and wait for me at the hospital. I'll come over as soon as I'm done here." After hanging up, the last trace of hesitation vanished from his eyes. He looked back at me, his gaze colder than before, now tinged with a decisive cruelty. "Emily, sign it." He tossed a surgical consent form onto my chest. "Don't force me to do this in an uglier way." I stared at the form, every word a searing brand on my eyes. In that instant, he personally tore my heart to shreds. "You're killing your own flesh and blood for someone else's child." The words were squeezed from between my teeth, each one tasting of blood. "Aiden is my son too," he snarled, as if I'd struck a nerve. I laughed. tears streaming down my face. That child, Aiden, bore no resemblance to him, yet he believed Victoria's words without a doubt. Meanwhile, the baby in my womb, carrying half his blood, was just a disposable pawn in his eyes. "Ethan, you will regret this," I stared at him, enunciating each word. "Let me tell you a secret. I am the sole heir to the Sterling Foundation. If you touch my child today, I will make your Vance Corporation disappear from New York City tomorrow." It was my last card, the final safeguard I had prepared for this marriage. I had never wanted to use my status to pressure him. I only wanted to be his ordinary wife. But for my child, I could no longer hold back. Ethan, however, just stared at me for a moment, then let out a low, mocking laugh, as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. "The Sterling Foundation? Emily, have you been reading too many novels?" He leaned down, gripping my chin and forcing me to look at him. His eyes were filled with pity and disdain, as if looking at a lunatic. "You, an orphan who grew up in the foster care system, with nothing but a pretty face. Who gave you the audacity to spin such a ridiculous lie?" My heart sank into a frozen abyss. Of course, I had forgotten. 3 years ago, to be with him on equal footing, to prevent him from feeling insecure about the massive gap in our statuses, I had fabricated an orphan's identity. I told him I had no parents, no one to rely on but him. I thought it was a sacrifice for love. Now I saw it was just me digging my own grave. "Do it." He released my chin, straightened up, and gave a cold command to the doctor beside him, not sparing me another glance. "No, don't!" I thrashed wildly, my wrists and ankles chafing raw against the restraints. I was like a dying beast, letting out a desperate, hoarse scream. "Ethan, you monster! You'll pay for this! I'll haunt you even as a ghost." A nurse approached, inserting a cold needle into my arm. "Don't be nervous. It's just a sedative," she said mechanically. The cold liquid spread through my veins, and my strength rapidly drained away. My consciousness began to blur. In my fading vision, Ethan's tall figure receded, finally disappearing beyond the operating room doors. A final tear slid from the corner of my eye. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have defied you for a man, shouldn't have abandoned my identity, foolishly believing love could conquer all. Now, my karma has come. I've killed your unborn grandson with my own hands." Darkness swallowed me like a tidal wave. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I came to, it was a bone-chilling cold that woke me. I found myself on a frigid metal slab, covered only by a thin white sheet. The air was thick, with the morbid, cloying smell of formalin and death. This was the hospital morgue. My body was still stiff from the anesthesia, but I didn't care. I shot upright, frantically looking around. Not far from me, another metal slab was covered by a white sheet, but beneath it was only a small, raised shape. My heart was seized by an invisible hand, making it nearly impossible to breathe. I scrambled over, my hands trembling as I lifted the sheet. It was a fully formed baby boy. His tiny body was curled up, his skin a bluish purple from lack of oxygen. His eyes were shut tight as if he were only sleeping. I could even see the faint outline of his brows, so much like Ethan's. My child, my baby who never got to see the world, never got to be held by me, who I never even had the chance to name. A suppressed, inhuman wail of grief erupted from the depths of my throat. I clutched his small, cold body to my chest, tears streaming down my face like a broken dam. I didn't make a sound, just wept silently, my body racked with violent tremors. An immense mountain of grief and regret crushed the air from my lungs. It was me. I was too naive, too foolish. It was my repeated concessions and forgiveness that fueled Ethan's arrogance and cruelty. It was me, clipping my own wings for a laughable notion of love, who gave him the audacity to hurt me, to hurt our child. Ethan Vance, Victoria Bell. I chewed on their names in my heart, the hatred deepening with each repetition. I don't know how much time passed. My tears ran dry, and my heart died completely. The child's body in my arms had grown stiff. Gently, as if he were only asleep, I wrapped him back in the white sheet. Then, I slowly stood up. There was no longer any grief or weakness in my eyes, only a boundless, dead stillness and a chilling insanity. From a hidden pocket inside my blood-soaked hospital gown, I retrieved a cold metal emblem engraved with the sigil of a black datura flower. I had sealed this emblem away 3 years ago when I married Ethan, naively believing I would never have to use it again. I closed my eyes, channeling all my love, hatred, regret, and despair into my fingertips, and pressed the small, raised button in the center of the emblem with finality. A faint electronic beep echoed in the silent morgue. I dialed the number I hadn't called in 3 years. It was answered almost instantly. Miss Hayes. A man's steady, respectful voice came through the line, tinged with an almost imperceptible excitement. My own voice was as raw as sandpaper, every word clawed up from the depths of hell. Silas, it's me. I looked down at the silent child in my arms. Come get me. The game of playing house is over. New York City glittered under the night sky, a metropolis built of money and desire. In the grand ballroom atop the flagship 7-star hotel of the Vance Corporation, the lights were dazzling, and the city's elite were gathered. The grand occasion was the announcement of the merger between the Vance Corporation and Bell Enterprises, doubling as a charity gala. The evening stars, Ethan and Victoria, stood under a magnificent crystal chandelier, accepting congratulations from all sides. Ethan, in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, held a champagne flute, the picture of success. A practiced smile hung on his handsome face as he moved effortlessly among the city's power players. Victoria wore a white, strapless gown, its skirt embedded with thousands of tiny diamonds that shimmered under the lights. Her makeup was exquisite, but a certain pallor gave her a damsel in distress vulnerability. She clung to Ethan's arm, her posture demure, but her eyes, as they swept the room, shone with the triumph of a victor. Mr. Vance, congratulations. I heard you found a cure for your son, a portly man said, fawning over Ethan. Ethan touched his glass to the man's in a reserved gesture, a faint smile on his lips. Thanks to everyone's support, we've secured the crucial umbilical cord stem cells. Aiden will be on the road to recovery very soon. His tone was so casual, as if the source of that life wasn't torn from my unborn child, but was merely a commodity he'd purchased. That's wonderful news, another socialite chimed in, covering her mouth with a handkerchief in a gesture of faux sympathy. You truly are a saint, Mr. Vance. That Emily, I heard she was always a bit unstable. This miscarriage must have sent her completely over the edge. For you to still be so charitable, what a heart. Exactly. He should have divorced that crazy woman long ago. A well-bred lady like Miss Bell is the only one worthy of Mr. Vance. The chorus of flattery swelled around them. Victoria lowered her head shyly, a blush creeping up her cheeks as she stole a glance at Ethan, her eyes filled with adoration. Ethan was clearly enjoying the attention. He patted her hand, a tenderness in his eyes I had never witnessed, and raised his glass to the crowd. Thank you all for your concern. Let's let the past with Emily be the past. From now on, Victoria and Aiden are the most important people in my life. His words were met with a roar of applause. They were here, celebrating their future with my child's blood. Meanwhile, I was in a speeding black armored sedan, clutching a cold, small urn. The city lights blurred past the window like iridescent wounds. My face, reflected in the glass, was as pale as a sheet. The eyes that once held so much love were now just hollow voids. We've arrived, Miss Hayes. Silas's voice from the front seat pulled me back to reality. The car had stopped at the hotel's service entrance. I looked up at the glittering skyscraper, a cold smile slowly forming on my lips. Silas, I asked softly, my fingers tracing the cool surface of the urn. What kind of fireworks do you think would be fitting for such a grand celebration? Silas met my gaze in the rearview mirror. His chiseled, stoic face showed no emotion, but a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. The kind that would level this place to the ground, he answered in a low tone. I shook my head and laughed, a laugh devoid of warmth, only bone-deep cold. No, that's too easy on them. I want the kind of fireworks that will burn into their memories for eternity. I pushed the door open and stepped out. Silas immediately followed, draping a black cashmere coat over my shoulders, hiding the blood-stained hospital gown beneath. At the service entrance, 100 men in black suits, sunglasses, and earpieces stood waiting in silence. At the sight of me, they bowed in unison. Miss Hayes. Each of these men was a hand-picked elite from a private security firm, a killing machine capable of taking on 100 men. I ignored them and walked towards the employee corridor. 2 security guards, seeing our imposing group, moved to block us. "Excuse me, this is a restricted area." Before they could finish, 2 of Silas's men moved like ghosts. With 2 sharp cracks of bone, the guards crumpled to the ground like rag dolls, not even managing a scream. I walked past them without a second glance. We took a service elevator straight to the top floor. Every security camera we passed switched to a looped recording of an empty hallway a second before we entered its view. In the backstage area, a few staff members on break stared in shock at our arrival. With a single gesture from Silas, his men moved in, silencing them professionally and efficiently. I walked to the large double doors leading into the ballroom. Through the crack, I could hear the sounds of laughter, could hear Ethan's triumphant voice. It was grating. Just then, the roar of helicopter rotors grew from a distant hum to a deafening thunder overhead. The people in the ballroom paused, and some curiously walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. "What is that? Helicopters? My God, look!" Against the night sky, 20 matte black, unmarked military-grade helicopters had appeared, circling the hotel like specters of death. The weapons systems mounted on their frames gleamed coldly in the moonlight. In the next second, all 20 helicopters switched on their high-powered searchlights. 20 thick beams of light, like pillars from heaven, pierced the ballroom's glass walls, overpowering the lavish chandeliers. The entire hall was plunged into an eerie, floodlit silence. Everyone was stunned. They shielded their eyes, their faces, masks of confusion and fear. Ethan and Victoria froze on the stage, their smiles wiped clean, and that was only the beginning. Bang, 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 bang. With 5 deafening explosions, the tempered glass walls on all sides of the ballroom were breached simultaneously from the outside. A storm of glass shards and wind ripped through the hall. Guests screamed in terror, scrambling for cover. The ballroom descended into chaos. Through the shattered walls, hundreds of black-clad figures rappelled down from the sky, landing silently inside. They wore tactical gear, Zhengning Guimian masks, and carried state-of-the-art assault rifles, the infrared sights on their barrels sweeping across the panicked crowd like the eyes of death. No one dared to move. Even the screams died in their throats, replaced by the ragged sound of terrified breathing. As everyone was paralyzed by this hellish scene, the ballroom's main doors were slowly pushed open from the outside. I stood in the doorway. I had taken off the coat, revealing the blood-stained hospital gown. Cradling the small urn, I walked, step by step, into the abattoir I had created. Silas followed, pushing an empty wheelchair, but I didn't use it. Each of my steps was steady, my heels crunching on the glass-strewn marble floor, a final countdown for this feast of death. All eyes were on me, shock, confusion, fear. Ethan stared at me, then at the urn in my arms. His pupils contracted violently, the blood draining from his face. Emily? His voice trembled, unable to believe his eyes. I ignored him, walking to the center of the ballroom. My gaze swept over the terrified faces, finally landing on the couple on the stage. I slowly raised the urn. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried like a judgment from the depths of hell, reaching every ear. "Since you two love children so much," I looked at them, a cruel, strange smile gracing my lips. "Why don't you go down and keep my child company?" My voice was soft, almost gentle, but in the dead, silent ballroom, it was like a thunderclap. He stared at me, his eyes filled with not just shock and fear, but a profound sense of absurdity. "Emily, you're insane!" he finally roared, snapping out of his shock. "Where did you hire these actors? You think you can scare me with some cheap costumes? This isn't a movie." Even now, he refused to believe it. In his deep-seated perception, I, Emily Hayes, was a helpless woman who couldn't survive without him. He would rather believe this was an elaborate, desperate farce I had staged than accept that I possessed the power to shatter his reality. Actors? I looked down at the urn and laughed. It was a soft laugh, yet filled with an indescribable sadness and madness. Ethan, you'll soon find out who the real clown is, tonight. On the stage, Victoria was already petrified with fear. She gripped Ethan's arm, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. She looked at me, her eyes spitting venom and jealousy. "Emily, you bitch! You dare to come back!" she shrieked, the mask of gentle fragility torn to shreds by her terror. "Ethan, call security! Get security to drag this lunatic out of here." Her words seemed to snap Ethan back to his senses. He forced himself to look composed and reached for his phone. "Security! Where the hell is security?" he yelled into the phone, only to be met with static. There was no signal. He tried dialing 911. The result was the same. "What's going on?" The composure on his face began to crack, a genuine panic seeping into his eyes. "Don't waste your energy," I said calmly, stating a fact. "From the moment we entered, all communication signals in this building have been jammed. This is an isolated island now." My words were like a bucket of ice water poured over his head. He finally realized that things were truly out of his control. What do you want?" His voice trembled. "What do I want?" I raised my head, my gaze traveling past him to the champagne tower behind him, a symbol of their happiness. I didn't speak, just gave Silas a look. He understood. Without even raising a weapon, he drew a gleaming combat knife from his belt. In the next instant, he vanished. No one in the room, not even the so-called elites, saw him move. They only heard a faint whoosh and saw a silver streak fly across the room. Crash! The 3-meter-high tower, built from hundreds of crystal glasses, was shattered from the top by the impossibly precise throw. Golden champagne and glass shards cascaded down like a waterfall, creating a ruin on the floor. The loud crash was a stinging slap across Ethan and Victoria's faces. Victoria let out a piercing scream and collapsed. Ethan stumbled back, watching in horror as Silas reappeared by my side, as if looking at a monster. "That's the first interest payment," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "Now, let's get down to business." I held out my hand. Silas immediately took a file from his briefcase and handed it to me. I walked up to the stage, document in hand. Ethan backed away instinctively until he was pressed against the wall. "Emily, don't do anything crazy," he stammered. "I know you're upset about the baby. What do you want as compensation? Money? A house? A car? Just name it." Even now, he thought money could solve this. I reached him and slapped the file across his face. The papers scattered. He flinched, expecting divorce papers. But when his eyes focused on the bolded title at the top of the page, his pupils shrank. It wasn't a divorce agreement. It was a notice of debt liquidation and asset freeze for the Vance Corporation. What is this?" he stammered, looking up at me in disbelief. "Don't understand?" I looked down on him, a cruel smirk on my face. "Let me explain." I paused, my voice carrying across the silent hall. 3 years ago, you applied for a $5 billion commercial loan from East Asia Bank, using the next 10 years of Vance Corp's profits as collateral. Unfortunately for you, I am the bank's largest shareholder. 2 years ago, you issued $3 billion in corporate bonds to develop that West Side property. Coincidentally, I am also the largest creditor. A year ago, to acquire that failing overseas tech company, you signed a high-risk V-bet agreement with a 300% return rate. What a pity. The mysterious offshore fund you were betting against? That was also me. With every sentence, Ethan's face grew paler. By the end, he was ashen, his lips trembling, unable to form a coherent word. I looked at his devastated expression with no sense of triumph, only a deep, weary sadness. "Ethan, for the past 3 years, your company has been on the brink of bankruptcy at least 3 times. Each time, you thought you saved it, that your business genius pulled it back from the edge. You must have felt so proud." I leaned in, my voice a whisper only he could hear. "You were wrong. It wasn't your genius. It was me. I sold off the heirlooms my mother left me, and I used that money to secretly bail you out, again and again. I thought once your career was stable, you would settle down, and we could live like a normal couple. I even thought that if I kept my identity a secret, you could always be that proud CEO, never feeling pressured by who I was. My voice was soft, as if telling a story about someone else. But I was wrong. I didn't give you capital to build a life. I gave you the fuel for your greed, your coldness, your audacity. You used my money to keep a mistress, to buy her mansions and jewelry. You even used it to arrange for the murder of our child for her bastard son. My head snapped up, my eyes blazing with a universe of hate. So now, I don't want you anymore. I just want back what's mine. I stepped back, pointing to the documents on the floor. According to the contracts, the Vance Corporation has long been insolvent. Legally speaking, it now belongs to me. And you, Ethan Vance. I looked at him and delivered the verdict, word by word, are bankrupt. No, impossible. Ethan shook his head frantically, as if deranged. You're lying. This is all fake. You forged it. He couldn't accept that his proud empire, everything he had built his life upon, was nothing but a dream I had bankrolled from the start. Just then, Victoria, who had been collapsed on the floor, scrambled up and lunged at me. Emily, you venomous witch! You'll die a horrible death! Before her hands could touch me, Silas stepped forward, grabbing her by the neck and lifting her off the ground with one hand. Let me go, she choked, her face turning purple. I looked at her coldly, then said to Silas, She loves children so much, doesn't she? Let her have a taste of what it's like to lose what's most precious to her. A look of understanding crossed Silas's eyes. He applied pressure. A sickening crack echoed, followed by a scream from Victoria so shrill it was barely human. Without another glance at them, I turned, holding my child, and walked towards the door. Stop! Ethan's shattered roar came from behind me. I paused but didn't turn back. Emily, you can't do this to me. His voice was thick with desperation and disbelief. We were husband and wife. Are you really going to be this heartless? Husband and wife? I laughed. From the moment you signed that consent form, the only thing between us has been a blood debt. Without another word, I walked out, flanked by my men, leaving behind the wreckage of the ballroom and a broken man who had lost everything. A man who had finally, tragically, understood what he had thrown away. As I left the hotel, a storm broke over the city. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, unable to clean the filth from the city's night. I sat in the back, the urn in my lap now faintly warm from my body heat, though it could never warm the small soul within. Miss Hayes, back to the estate? Silas asked, his eyes on me in the rearview mirror. No, I said, my voice weary but firm, watching the blurred lights. Go to the Park Avenue penthouse. I want to watch, with my own eyes, as he discovers he's become a stray dog. That penthouse was the home Ethan had been so proud of, the cage I had spent 3 years meticulously decorating. Half an hour later, Ethan's car stumbled into the building's private drive. On the security monitor, I saw him, soaked to the bone, standing at the door. His expensive suit was a wrinkled mess, his confident CEO demeanor gone, replaced by a frantic bewilderment. He instinctively pressed his thumb to the fingerprint scanner. Beep! Fingerprint authentication failed. The cold, mechanical sound was piercing in the rainy night. He froze, then wiped his finger on his jacket, thinking the rain was the issue. He tried again. Beep! Fingerprint authentication failed. He started punching in the passcode our wedding anniversary. Impossible to forget. Incorrect passcode. System locked. Damn it! Ethan kicked the heavy bronze door. He started pounding on it like a madman. Open up! Is anyone home? Open the door! There was no answer. I had dismissed all the staff yesterday. It was an empty, dead house. Panic finally set in, a fear born not from being locked out, but from a broken routine. For the past 3 years, no matter how late he came home, a warm light was always left on. The moment he rang, that foolish woman named Emily would run to open the door, a warm pair of slippers in hand. Now, all that greeted him was the cold rain and a locked door. He fumbled for his phone to call a locksmith, but when he dialed his building manager, the voice on the other end was cold. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. Miss Hayes has terminated your residency agreement. I must also remind you that the title for this penthouse is in Miss Hayes's name. You have no legal right to force entry, or we will have to contact the NYPD." "What are you talking about? I bought this place," he roared. "You seem to have forgotten, Mr. Vance." The manager's voice was a knife. "The down payment was made by Miss Hayes after she liquidated a trust fund. The monthly mortgage payments were also made from her personal accounts. Legally, this property has nothing to do with you." The phone slipped from Ethan's grasp, the screen shattering on the pavement. He stood numbly in the rain, staring at the familiar building, which now felt utterly alien. He finally realized that his entire life of privilege for the past 3 years was built upon the support of the woman he had dismissed as a nobody. He wasn't a tycoon, he was a parasite. As he stood there in despair, a black Maybach pulled up. The window rolled down to reveal the stern face of Mr. Davison, the president of a major commercial bank, a man who used to bow and scrape before him. Ethan lunged at the car, as if it were a lifeline. "Davison, you're just in time. Loan me some money, 5 million will do, or approve that loan. My company just has a temporary cash flow problem." Davison looked in disgust at the muddy hand gripping his window. "Vance, get your hand off my car," he said coldly. Ethan froze. "Davison, what is this? We used to be." "That was then." Davison cut him off, pulling a document from his briefcase and shoving it through the crack in the window. "This is a notice that you've been officially blacklisted from all financial institutions. It's from Miss Hayes. In the New York financial world, Vance, you're a dead man. Forget 5 million. You couldn't get a loan for $500 right now." The window rolled up, severing Ethan's last shred of hope. The Maybach sped off, splashing muddy water all over him. He collapsed into the filth, clutching the notice, and let out a primal, animalistic howl. From my monitor, I swirled the red wine in my glass, feeling no pleasure, only a profound sadness. "You see, Silas?" I said, my voice as light as smoke. "That is the man I loved for 5 years. Strip away the golden armor I gave him, and he's less than a stray dog." Silas bowed his head. "He was never worthy of you, Miss Hayes." "No, he wasn't." I drained my glass, the last bit of warmth in my eyes extinguished. "But this isn't enough. This is just the beginning. Destitute and homeless, Ethan ended up at Victoria's Place, his last refuge in the city. The irony was, the down payment for her luxury downtown apartment had also been embezzled from company funds, a hole that I, again, had secretly filled. I didn't rush to reclaim the property. I wanted it to be the tomb of their fake love. The camera feed switched to the apartment's interior. Victoria, in a silk robe and a face mask, opened the door. A flicker of disgust crossed her face at Ethan's pathetic state, quickly replaced by a look of concern. "Ethan, what happened to you?" She pulled him inside. "I heard about what happened at the gala. That Emily is insane. But it's okay. As long as Aiden is saved, we can start over." She didn't yet know he was completely broke. Ethan collapsed on the sofa, grabbing her hand. "Tori, how much money do you have? I need it. The company accounts are frozen. I need cash to bribe some people, to get things moving again." Victoria's hands stiffened. "Ethan, you know Aiden's medical bills are astronomical. I don't have much saved up." "How can you not?" he snapped. "I just gave you a card with 5 million on it last month, and all that jewelry I bought you. We can pawn it for now. When I get back on my feet, I'll buy you better things." She pulled her hand away. "That money, I used it for Aiden's hospital bills. And the jewelry, I lost some of it." Even through the screen, I could smell the stench of her deceit. "You spent it all?" Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "That was $5 million. Is he staying at the Ritz? What's that supposed to mean, Ethan?" Victoria's voice suddenly shot up. "Are you complaining that we're expensive? Who was it that promised to take care of us for life? Now that you've hit a rough patch, you're trying to get your hands on my personal savings? Are you even a man?" The verbal assault stunned Ethan. Normally, he would have immediately placated her, but now, frazzled and humiliated, his temper flared. "I'm not a man? For your son, I killed my own child. Everything I'm going through now is for you," he roared, his eyes red. The argument escalated, their once sweet nothings shattering against the touchstone of money. It was time for me to add some fuel to the fire. I sent Victoria an anonymous text. "Ethan has a secret trust account in Switzerland with $10 million. Only he and his legal wife can access it." On the screen, Victoria's phone chimed. She glanced at it, and her wailing stopped abruptly. The look in her eyes changed from disgust to greedy calculation. She wiped her tears and threw herself into Ethan's arms. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I was just so stressed. I didn't mean it. I'll go find the jewelry right now. Whatever it takes, we'll get through this together." Ethan, bewildered by her sudden change but desperate for any affection in his moment of abandonment, was moved to tears. "Tori," he choked out, hugging her tightly, "I knew you were the only one who truly loves me." Watching them, I felt nothing but disgust. A fine performance. I switched off the monitor with a cold smile. Victoria thought it was a lifeline. In reality, it was a death warrant. She would cling to him for that non-existent trust. And when he couldn't produce the money, their conflict would snowball until they were tearing each other apart. The next day, in a desperate bid for cash, Ethan resorted to posting a long, tear-jerking story on social media, accusing me of being a vicious ex-wife who not only stole his assets, but was also obstructing his attempts to save his leukemic stepson. He included photos of himself at Aiden's bedside, painting himself as a noble, suffering father. Public opinion, ignorant of the facts, began to turn against me. "Since you're courting death, Emily, don't blame me for your total annihilation." I arranged for the most authoritative medical team in the city, along with dozens of major media outlets, to descend upon the private hospital where Aiden was staying. In the hospital room, Ethan was in the middle of a live-streamed performance, holding Aiden's hand and weeping. The door burst open. "What are you people doing here?" Ethan jumped up, panicked. I rolled into the room in my wheelchair. "Mr. Vance," I said calmly to the flashing cameras, "since you've been telling the world how heartless I am, I've brought a team of the world's top hematology experts to give young Aiden a free consultation. If he truly needs a bone marrow transplant, I, Emily Hayes, will spare no expense to help. I don't need your hypocritical charity. Get out!" he yelled. "Why so agitated, Mr. Vance? Is there something to hide?" I gestured for the doctors to proceed. Under the control of my security, Ethan and Victoria were helpless. The experts quickly drew blood and ran tests. Half an hour later, a fresh report was presented to the cameras. According to all diagnostic markers, the lead doctor announced gravely, "Aiden's hematological system is perfectly healthy. There is no sign of leukemia. In fact, he isn't even anemic. The so-called signs of chemotherapy are likely the result of certain hormonal drugs causing temporary hair loss and weakness." The room erupted. Reporters shoved microphones in Ethan's face. "Mr. Vance, can you explain this? Were you using a child's health to commit donation fraud?" Ethan was dumbstruck. He whipped his head around to look at Victoria. Victoria's face was chalk white. "No, the doctors are wrong." "Wrong?" I sneered, throwing a stack of papers at Ethan's face. "These are the bank records of Victoria bribing a doctor to forge medical records, and the purchase receipts for the hormonal drugs. Open your eyes, Ethan, and see the truth." He shakily picked up the evidence. Every word was a knife in his heart. The life-or-death reason for needing the umbilical cord blood was a lie from the very beginning. The child was never sick. And for this healthy, other man's child, he had sent his own 6-month-old fetus to the operating table. "Ah!" A gut-wrenching scream tore from Ethan's throat. He lunged at Victoria, his hands closing around her neck. "You lied to me! You poisonous bitch! You lied! That was my child! I killed him with my own hands. I killed him!" The scene descended into a chaotic, ugly brawl, which the reporters eagerly captured. I watched silently as Ethan raged and repented like a mad dog. But what good was regret? My child was never coming back. That night, the police took Ethan in for questioning about the donation fraud. He was released quickly, but his reputation was in ruins. Later, he showed up outside my estate, kneeling at the iron gate in the pouring rain, drunk and weeping. "Emily! I was wrong. I'm an animal. Open the door." He started reminiscing about our college days, about the good times. But the boy who had waited 2 hours in the cold to buy me chestnuts was long dead, buried by his own greed and cruelty. Kneeling outside was just a murderer. "Get rid of him?" Silas asked. "No," I said, drawing the heavy curtains. "Let him kneel. As long as he doesn't die, leave him be. The cold he's feeling is nothing compared to the cold my baby felt in the morgue." I wanted him to know what it felt like to have no one answer his prayers. He knelt all night. The next day, he was taken to the hospital with pneumonia. He tried to get into his old office at the Vance Corporation Tower, but my security threw him out. I had them let him up. The office was completely redecorated. The photo of him and Victoria was replaced by a massive oil painting of Dante's Inferno. "Emily!" he gasped, his eyes red with fury and disbelief. "You're the Sterling heir? Why? Why did you watch me beg like a dog? You're too cruel." Even now, he blamed me. I slapped him across the face, hard. "I gave you countless chances, Ethan. You took my love, my money, and my child, and you threw it all away. You killed the Emily who loved you." I pressed a button on my desk. "Notify the engineering department. Begin now." Through the window, he watched in horror as a crane and a crew with cutting torches began to dismantle the giant gold Vance Corporation sign from the top of the building. With a final, deafening crash, the massive V plummeted to the street below, shattering into pieces. "No!" he screamed, clawing at the glass. "From today," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm, "there is no more Vance Corporation. This building will be renamed the Aiden Memorial Tower, in memory of the child you murdered." He collapsed, finally understanding that he hadn't just lost his wealth, but every trace of his existence. His vindictive mother came by the estate, trying to wheedle her way back into my life now that she knew who I was, but I had Silas throw her out. The game was far from over. I sat in the black leather chair that symbolized absolute power, toying with a Zippo lighter. The flame danced at my fingertips, mirroring the blood-red coldness in my eyes. Before me, bound and gagged, knelt Victoria Bell. Her once perfect face was a mess of tear-streaked makeup, and beside her stood a grim-faced Ethan. Though I had stripped him of everything, a bizarre sense of superiority still clung to him. "Emily, what is the meaning of this?" he spat. Victoria tried to run. "I get it. But bringing her here, is this just to humiliate us? I'm telling you, our love is stronger than anything you can do." "Love?" I chuckled, snapping the lighter shut. "Ethan, your entire life is the punchline to that joke." I didn't present the final, devastating piece of evidence just yet. I wanted to savor his last moments of denial. "You really believe that boy is your son, don't you? The Vance heir you were willing to sacrifice everything for?" I rose and walked towards him. "Of course he is," Ethan said, though his eyes flickered. "Victoria gave me a son. That's more than you could do." The mention of my child was a physical blow. "Shut up," I hissed, my voice freezing the air. I picked up a sealed manila envelope from my desk, not just a paternity test, but the final, farcical verdict on his life. "Since you're so confident," I said, tapping the envelope against his chest, "why don't you open it and see what kind of heir you've been protecting?" His hands trembled as he took it. He glanced at Victoria, who was now prostrate on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. "Tori?" A dreadful premonition slithered up his spine. Don't look," she whimpered. His hands froze. He looked at her guilt-ridden state, then at my cruel smile, and a crack appeared in the foundation of his reality. With excruciating slowness, he tore open the seal. His eyes skipped past the medical jargon to the final conclusion. "Based on DNA analysis, the alleged father, Ethan Vance, is excluded as the biological father of the child, Aiden Bell." Boom. Ethan's world exploded. "No," he whispered. "This is a forgery. You did this to destroy me." He glared at me. A cornered, rabid dog. Aiden looks just like me. Like you? I clapped my hands. Bring him in. Two of my men dragged in a sleazy, blonde-dyed punk. This, I announced, is Jimmy, a local delinquent. He is also Victoria's ex-boyfriend. And, more importantly, Aiden's biological father. Ethan stared at the punk's face, the snub nose, the shifty eyes, and the resemblance was undeniable. The likeness he had seen before was nothing but a delusion fueled by a desperate desire for a son. I don't believe it, he stammered, backing away. He turned to Jimmy. Tell me what's going on. It wasn't my fault, man, Jimmy cried, falling to his knees. It was her. Victoria said she found a rich, stupid sucker who'd pay to raise our kid. Rich, stupid sucker. The words were knives twisting in his gut. For this, he had abandoned a woman who adored him, killed his own unborn child, and humbled himself before the world. He had been raising another man's son all along. He wasn't just a murderer, he was a fool, the biggest joke in the world. A sound, barely human, ripped from his throat. He lunged at Victoria, his hands closing around her neck. You bitch! You lied to me! I killed my son for you! My only son! The rage and regret were so intense that he coughed up a spray of blood, splattering her face before collapsing backward, gasping for air, tears and blood mixing on his face. I watched the sordid drama with an empty heart. The pain was real, but it brought me no joy. No amount of his suffering could bring my child back. Drag him out, I said, my voice tired. Don't get my floor dirty. Kill me, Emily, he sobbed as they dragged him away. Please, just kill me. But Ethan didn't die. Instead, the profound shame curdled into a twisted, obsessive hatred. In his warped mind, the tragedy was all my fault. If she had just told me who she was, I never would have fallen for Victoria's lies. She set this all up to watch me suffer. This delusion became his only reason to live. He disappeared into the city's underbelly, sold everything he had left, and hired a crew of thugs for one last, desperate act of revenge. He chose the anniversary of our child's death. I was on my way to the cemetery to visit the small, unmarked grave I had made. On a deserted mountain road, his pathetic ambush began. A beat-up van and two SUVs boxed in my car. Ethan emerged, a ghost of his former self, emaciated, filthy, with a rusty machete in his hand and a terrifying, manic gleam in his eyes. Get out, Emily, he roared. I stepped out of the car, Silas at my side. What is this, Ethan? I asked, my voice calm. A robbery? Stop pretending, he shrieked, waving the machete. You destroyed me. You made me a laughingstock. Today, I'm dragging you to hell with me to go see that dead kid. You don't get to say his name, I said, my voice turning to steel. You murdered him. It was your fault, he screamed, his logic completely fractured. If you'd told me you were rich, none of this would have happened. You were the one who handed me the knife. The sheer, shameless depravity of his argument extinguished the last ember of pity I had for him. You're pathetic, Ethan, I said, stepping forward until the tip of his blade touched my chest. You want to die? Then do it. One push, and it's all over. No more debt, no more shame, no more guilt. Do it. He hesitated, his hand trembling. In my fearless eyes, he saw a flood of memories. The girl who saved him a seat in the library, the wife who carried him home when he was drunk and broken, the mother begging for her child's life. He was afraid not of killing, but of facing the woman he had so thoroughly destroyed. Before he could act, a flicker of movement. A coin, thrown by Silas, whistled through the air and pierced Ethan's wrist. He screamed as the machete clattered to the ground. From the surrounding woods, dozens of my men emerged, silent and armed, surrounding his ragtag crew. Ethan collapsed to his knees in the mud, utterly defeated. This was his grand revenge. I picked up his machete. You don't even have the courage to die, do you? I said, slapping his face with the flat of the blade. I had him dragged to the cemetery and forced him to his knees before the simple gravestone that read, "In memory of Aiden." Kowtow, I commanded. He slammed his forehead against the ground 3 times, drawing blood. Just then, a crew of local gangsters Ethan had hired arrived late, led by a loudmouth thug who started bragging about his connections to a powerful DC political family, the Bradfords. "Buddy Bradford is like a brother to me," he boasted, oblivious to the professional soldiers surrounding him. Ethan's eyes lit up with a final, desperate hope. "Boss, save me." Before the thug could continue his tirade, a motorcade of unparalleled luxury swept into the cemetery, a Rolls-Royce Phantom with diplomatic plates, escorted by 4 Land Rovers. An elderly man in a bespoke suit stepped out, leaning on a cane. It was my father, Arthur Hayes, the patriarch of the Sterling Foundation, a man whose whispers could shake global markets. The D.C. gangster turned white as a sheet. Ethan looked as if he'd seen God. My father had not spoken to me in 3 years, not since I had renounced my family to marry Ethan. But now, he walked straight to me, his eyes filled with a deep, aching sorrow. "Emily," he said, his voice raspy with age and emotion. "You've suffered. The dam broke." I collapsed into his arms, sobbing out 3 years of pain and regret. "Dad, I was so wrong." "It's all right," he murmured, stroking my hair. "Daddy's here now. No one will ever hurt you again." He glanced at the posturing gangster, then gestured to his aide, who made a call on a satellite phone. "Hello?" a young, arrogant voice answered. It was Buddy Bradford. "This is Arthur Hayes," my father said simply. There was a crash on the other end of the line, then a panicked, fawning voice. "Mr. Hayes, sir, what an honor! To what do I owe this pleasure?" "Your man is in New York," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet, pointing a weapon at my daughter. "What?" Bradford shrieked. "Sir, I swear, he is not my man. I don't know him. Please, do with that scum whatever you wish. I'm on the next flight to New York to apologize in person." The gangster collapsed, soiling himself. Ethan's last hope dissolved. He began to laugh, a hysterical, broken sound. "I'm an idiot," he wept, "the world's biggest idiot. My father left me to handle the final act." I walked to Ethan. "Kill me," he begged, his voice a raw whisper. "Please, give me a quick end." "Death is too easy for you, Ethan," I said, my voice a cruel caress. "I want you to live a long, long life. I want you to spend every second of it in regret. You love money? You'll spend the rest of your life buried in unpayable debt, every cent you earn garnished, left with just enough to buy stale bread. You wanted a son? You'll live in the same slum as Jimmy, and every day you will see the face of the man who cuckolded you, a constant reminder of what a pathetic fool you are." "You're a devil," he gasped. "You taught me how to be," I replied. "That hand," I said to Silas, pointing to Ethan's right hand. "The one he signed the consent form with. I don't want to see it anymore." "No, Emily, please," he screamed. "My hand. I'm a designer. It's my life." I turned away, a sickening crunch, followed by a scream that echoed through the cemetery. They threw him, broken and whimpering, into the back of a van and drove him to the city's most wretched slum. The great debt was finally paid. A year later, in the foulest corner of a New York slum, a figure huddled amidst the garbage, fighting a stray dog for a piece of moldy bread. His hair was a matted mess, his face ravaged by filth and frostbite, and his right hand was a twisted, useless claw. It was Ethan. He lost the fight to the dog and was then kicked by other homeless men for trying to hoard food. As he lay in the filth, a massive LED screen on a skyscraper across the street lit up. It was an advertisement for the most expensive billboard in the city. On the screen, a woman in a stunning white couture gown walked onto a stage to thunderous applause. She was beautiful, poised, radiating a regal, untouchable power. It was me. The caption read, "Sterling Foundation Chairwoman Emily Hayes launches the Global Angel Fund. Hello, everyone. I am Emily Hayes." My voice boomed across the slum. "I stand here today not just as a chairwoman, but as a mother who has lost a child." Ethan's heart seized. "I know that pain intimately," I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion in my eyes. And so I have established this fund to help children from low-income families receive treatment for serious illnesses. I hope that no mother has to feel that despair, that no more angels are lost too soon." The audience on screen gave a standing ovation. Ethan watched, tears carving clean tracks through the grime on his face. He reached out a trembling hand, trying to touch the image of the goddess on the screen, the wife he had thrown away, the queen whose king he could have been. "What are you looking at, you piece of trash?" A passerby sneered, kicking him. "That's Miss Hayes. You're not worthy to even look at her." Ethan curled into a ball, his eyes fixed on the screen as if in a trance. In that moment, my image on the screen seemed to look directly at him, my gaze passing through the camera, across the city, into his dark corner. There was no love, no hate, just the profound, cosmic indifference of a god to an insect. He finally broke, burying his face in the dirt, his nails tearing at the ground as a final, gut-wrenching sob was torn from his soul. "Emily, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." In this hell of his own making, he would live out his days, forever chained to his regret. It was, I had to admit, a fate far worse than death. Another year passed. On a rainy spring day, I stood before the small grave again, placing a bouquet of white daisies. I had spent the year building an empire, working relentlessly to keep the ghosts at bay. "Hello, baby," I whispered. "Mommy's here. The foundation has helped over 3,000 children this year. If you were here, you'd be walking by now, wouldn't you? You'd be calling my name." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. A soft answer. "Miss Hayes?" Silas's voice was behind me. He draped a coat over my shoulders. "It's getting cold." Over the past year, he had been my constant shadow, my silent guardian. "Silas," I asked, looking out at the misty hills, "do you think scars ever truly fade?" He was quiet for a moment. "The wound heals," he said, his voice low and steady, "but the scar remains. It reminds you of the pain you endured, and it becomes your armor." Armor. Yes, the scar had forged me into a queen. In the next life, I mused, do you think I could just be an ordinary person? Find someone ordinary, live a simple life, without all this betrayal and pain? His grip on the umbrella tightened. "This life is still long, Miss Hayes. You don't need to be ordinary, you just need to be you. And happiness," he paused, his gaze meeting mine, a flicker of unprecedented warmth in his dark eyes. "It will come, if you let it. Perhaps it's already standing right behind you." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw my own reflection in his steadfast eyes. The ice around my heart seemed to crack, just a little. I would never love, with the reckless abandon I had once given to Ethan. But that didn't mean I was incapable of love, or unworthy of being loved. I turned back to the grave for a final farewell. "Baby, Mommy is leaving now. I'm going to live my life, for both of us. And it's going to be a brilliant one." "Let's go," I said, straightening my coat. As I walked away, the rain stopped, and a ray of golden sunlight broke through the clouds, warming my face. My father's car was waiting. He stood by the door, leaning on his cane, a gentle smile on his face. I walked towards him, towards my family, towards my future. Silas was right behind me, his presence a quiet, unwavering promise. I was no longer the pathetic Mrs. Vance. I was Emily Hayes. And my story was just beginning.